The sun burned low over the endless desert, casting long amber shadows across the twisted canyons, as if the land itself were exhaling at the end of a long day, and in that golden hour when light turns the Wild West into fire. Nayeli ran along the narrow cliff edge with a determination that could outmatch even the fiercest storm. Her breath came sharp, her feet slapped the dusty trail, and her eyes scanned every direction for the two outlaws who had stolen from her people food supplies, medicines, and the winter blankets meant for the children of her village. She knew she was exhausted. She knew her legs trembled with every step, but she also knew she had no choice, because if she didn't chase these thieves, innocent families would suffer, and she could never allow that burden to fall on her heart. The wind whipped around her, carrying the smell of dust, sage, and danger, and she narrowed her eyes against the horizon when suddenly the earth beneath her gave a violent shudder, then cracked. For a single heartbeat, silence swallowed the world. Then she felt the ground drop away beneath her as the cliff collapsed like brittle bone, pulling her downward in a rush of broken sandstone and terror. She tried to grab something, anything, but her fingers closed only around air as the wind tore a scream from her throat, the sky spinning wildly above her. And that was when Elias Cade heard it, a cowboy riding alone through the canyon floor. He was the kind of man who carried the storm behind his eyes, quiet, steady, haunted by the past he never spoke about. He had planned to camp by nightfall, maybe find a small fire to warm his weary bones, but the universe had other plans. Because when he heard the scream, he jerked his head upward just in time to see a figure falling from the sky like a wounded star. Without thinking, he launched his horse forward, boots digging into its sides as he reached out both arms. Time slowed, dust rose, the world held its breath. And then impact. She crashed into him, knocking the air from his lungs as he caught her, nearly losing his balance, nearly falling himself, but somehow, through instinct and grit, he held steady, pulling her firmly against him as his horse skidded to a stop amid a cloud of sand. Nayeli gasped, her heart pounding so loudly she could hardly hear anything else, her body trembling violently in his hold as she forced her eyes open, meeting the rugged, sunburned face of the cowboy who had saved her life. For a moment she said nothing. Shock stole her voice. Elias slowly lowered her to the ground. Shoulder. Easy now, he murmured in that low, calm voice that carried a strange warmth. You're safe. But Nayeli shook her head, pushing his hand away even as her legs wobbled under her. No, she rasped, swallowing the rising fear. Not safe. Not until I catch them. Elias raised a brow beneath his dusted hat. Catch who? The men who stole from my people. Pain shot through her ankle as she tried to take a step, and she hissed, momentarily grabbing his arm for balance. Elias caught her again, more firmly this time. You ain't in condition to chase nobody, he said. You almost fell to your death. Nayeli clenched her jaw, her pride flaring hotter than the desert sun. She hated appearing weak in front of a stranger, but she hated losing more. You don't understand, she said, breathing through the pain. If I don't find them, families will starve. Children will freeze. Elias's expression shifted, not pity, but something like recognition, like he had known that kind of responsibility once. Sit, he instructed gently, guiding her toward a large rock beneath the growing evening shade. She wanted to refuse. She always refused help. But for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to lean on someone else. As she sat, Elias crouched beside her, examining her ankle with careful hands. Sprained, he concluded. Not broken. But you ain't walking on it tonight. Nayeli let out a breath. Then I've lost them. Elias shook his head. Maybe not. She looked at him, a question rising in her eyes. He glanced toward the west, where the sun dipped lower, staining the sky in shades of fire and rose. Tracks are fresh, he said. I could follow 'em. Nayeli straightened, suspicion flashing across her face. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Elias shrugged slightly. Don't need to know someone to keep him alive. Saw a woman fallen, so I caught her. See a woman in trouble, I help. Trouble? She echoed sharply. I'm not helpless. Elias's lips tugged into the faintest hint of a smirk. Never said you were, but even the strongest folk need a hand sometimes. Nayeli's fierce eyes softened, just a little. And what do you want in return? Elias held her gaze, his voice steady. Nothing. That answer disarmed her more than anything else. She studied him, the dust on his shirt, the shadow in his eyes, the quiet strength in his hands. He was a man who had seen storms, a man who had learned not to rely on others, a man who rode alone because he believed he had no place to belong. And yet he had saved her, without hesitation, without reward, without knowing who she was or what danger she carried. "Thank you," she finally whispered, her voice thin but sincere. Elias nodded once. "I'll get you to shelter," he said, helping her up gently. She leaned on him more than she wanted to. Her body weakened from fear and adrenaline. Together they moved toward a small hollow between the canyon, walls where the wind softened, and the world felt slightly less dangerous. "You can rest here tonight," Elias said. "I'll make a small fire. Then at first light we track your thieves." Naya stared at him, half expecting him to change his mind, to walk away, to leave her like so many others had in her life. But instead he knelt beside the dry brush, striking flint with practiced ease, his movements calm, methodical, protective. As the fire crackled to life, painting his face in warm, flickering light, Naya felt an unexpected sense of safety, a feeling she hadn't known in years. "Why do you travel alone?" she asked quietly. Elias paused, staring into the flames. "Because everyone I ever cared about is gone," he said simply. The honesty in his voice cut deeper than a knife. Naya wanted to speak, to offer something, comfort, perhaps, but before she could, Elias stood and threw another piece of wood on the fire. "Get some rest," he said, softer this time. "You'll need your strength." She rested back against the rock, letting the warmth of the fire and the quiet presence of the cowboy ease her exhaustion. For a moment, as her eyes grew heavy, she studied him, this stranger who had become her only chance, her unexpected protector, and slowly something inside her whispered that fate had sent him for a reason. He wasn't just the man who saved her. He was the man who would change everything. As sleep began to pull her under, she heard Elias murmur with a small smile, "And if y'all watching enjoy these wild tales, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Keeps the campfire burning, and the stories coming." Dawn rose slowly over the desert, spilling light like molten gold across the canyon floor, warming the stones and waking the restless wind as Elias Cade prepared for the hunt, saddling his horse with quiet precision while Naya forced herself upright despite the dull throb in her ankle, refusing to show weakness even to the man who had seen her fall from the sky. The air was cool and sharp, and the fire they had slept beside had died to soft embers, glowing faintly like sleeping eyes. Elias approached her with a calm steadiness that made him feel more like a guardian than a stranger, handing her a small piece of dried meat. "Eat," he said simply, and though Naya wanted to argue, her hunger responded before her pride could, so she accepted it with a nod. As she ate, Elias walked the perimeter, crouching to examine the desert floor, running his fingers through the dust. "Tracks are still fresh," he called over his shoulder. "2 horses, heavy loads, heading west toward Dead Man's Ridge." Naya's pulse quickened. "Then we're close." Elias mounted his horse, then held out his hand. She stared at it for a moment, her independence warring with necessity, before finally placing her palm in his. He lifted her into the saddle with surprising gentleness, settling her in front of him so he could control the reins. When his arms came around her, she stiffened, unfamiliar with the closeness. But Elias said quietly, "I ain't here to trap you, just keeping you steady." And somehow, she believed him. They rode across the wide desert, the horse galloping with purposeful force as the wind tore through their hair, and the world blurred into streaks of red earth and blue sky. Naya pointed out signs the outlaws had left behind. Broken brush, a dropped scrap of cloth, hoofprints gouged deep into the sand, and Elias followed each clue like a man chasing ghosts, determined and silent. As they approached Dead Man's Ridge, the land grew harsher, the cliffs rising like jagged teeth, shadows swallowed by deeper shadows. "This place ain't friendly," Elias murmured. "They picked it for a reason." Naya tightened her grip on the saddle. "Then we'll go in carefully." Elias smirked softly. "Carefully's not usually how these things go." But he slowed the horse, guiding it behind a cluster of boulders. They dismounted, Elias supporting her weight as she tested her ankle. "I'll walk," she insisted, but he held her steady with one arm anyway. "You can walk," he said, "but you ain't walking alone." Together they moved forward, slipping between stone shadows until voices drifted toward them. Rough, mocking voices. Naya froze, her eyes burning with recognition. "That's them," she whispered. Elias pulled her gently. Holster at his hip. "Then let me do the talking." "No," she hissed. "This is my mission. My people." Elias turned to her, his gaze firm but soft. "I ain't taking your fight away. I'm just making sure you survive it." Her breath caught, not from fear, but from the way he said survive, as if the idea of losing her already struck something deep in him. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then the bandits' laughter echoed again and the moment dissolved. Elias guided her forward, until they reached a narrow gap between two tall rock walls. Through it, they could see the two outlaws lounging beside a small fire, the stolen supplies piled behind them, bags of grain, crates of medicine, thick wool blankets meant for winter. Rage surged through Naya, hot and sharp. She stepped forward, but Elias caught her wrist. "Not yet," he whispered. "If they grab a gun first, this'll end bloody." She swallowed, nodding reluctantly. Elias straightened, stepping into the open, with the calm confidence of a man who'd faced death enough times to know how to greet it. "Morning, boys," he said, strolling casually into view. The outlaws snapped upright, hands flying to their belts. "Who the hell are you?" One spat, his eyes narrowing. Elias tipped his hat. "Just a traveler passing through. Saw y'all carrying something. That didn't belong to you." The second outlaw snorted. "Ain't your business." "It is," Elias replied. "When the owner nearly died chasing you." Naya appeared behind him then, leaning on the rock wall, fierce and unbroken despite her injury. The outlaws recognized her immediately. "Look who survived the fall," one sneered. "Thought you were buzzard food." "Not today," she said, her voice razor sharp. Elias stepped forward slightly, placing himself between her and danger. Without thinking, an instinct he didn't even question. "Here's how this goes," Elias said. "You two hand over what you stole, and nobody gets hurt." The outlaws exchanged glances, then laughed. "You in what army, cowboy?" Elias slid one hand to his holster. "Just me," he said. "But that's enough." Guns flashed. Everything exploded into motion. A shot rang out, ricocheting off the canyon wall. Nayeli ducked behind a rock, her pulse pounding. Another shot, dust flew. Elias moved like lightning, drawing his gun with lethal precision, firing a single warning shot that clipped the outlaw's hat clean off his head. "Next bullet doesn't miss," Elias growled. But the second outlaw lunged, tackling Elias to the ground. They crashed into the dust, fists flying, grunts echoing through the canyon. Nayeli's heart twisted. Elias was fighting because of her, risking everything for her people. Gathering her strength, she seized a fallen branch and slammed it against the outlaw's back, letting out a cry of fury. The man stumbled, giving Elias the moment he needed to flip him onto the ground and wrench the gun from his hand. The fight ended in seconds. Seconds, but the silence that followed felt like thunder. Elias stood breathing hard, dust streaking his jaw, sweat glistening on his brow. Nayeli limped toward him, her eyes wide. "You okay?" she asked softly. Elias nodded, though the bruise forming on his cheek said otherwise. "Yeah," he said with a crooked grin. "You hit him harder than I expected." She rolled her eyes, but couldn't hide her smile. Together they tied the outlaws and began gathering the stolen supplies. As they worked, Nayeli said quietly, "I couldn't have done this without you." Elias paused, glancing at her with that steady, quiet gaze that always seemed to see deeper than she wanted. "Maybe not," he said, "but I reckon I couldn't have done it without you, either." Something warm fluttered in her chest, a dangerous warmth, the kind that crept in slowly but deeply. They mounted the horse again, the supplies secured behind them. As Elias guided them back toward the rising sun, Nayeli leaned back slightly against him, letting herself rest in the space where safety lived. And with the wind dancing around them and the desert waking once more, Elias murmured, "If y'all watching this tale are enjoying the ride, make sure to subscribe to the channel. More stories await, and you won't want to miss a single chapter of this journey." The journey back to Nayeli's village should have been simple, quiet. A victory ride beneath the warming sun, but fate in the wild. West never offered peace so easily. And as Elias and Nayeli traveled across the sprawling desert with the reclaimed supplies, tied behind them, an uneasy stillness clung to the wind, a silence too sharp to ignore, as if the very earth held its breath. Elias sensed it first, his instincts prickling beneath his skin, those instincts he had learned to trust after years of bounty hunting, wandering, and surviving battles that left scars on his body and deeper ones on his heart. Naya felt it too. Something watching, something following, something wrong, and though she did not speak it aloud, she pressed a little closer to Elias, bracing herself as the desert wind thickened with tension. They weren't working alone, Elias finally said, voice low, eyes scanning the ridge. Men like that rarely do. Naya tightened her grip on the saddle. Their leader, she murmured. I heard stories. They call him Rafe Blackthorn. Cruel, smart, a man who never leaves a debt, unpaid. Elias's jaw clenched slightly. Then he'll be coming for us. The thought settled heavily between them, but there was no turning back. The supplies needed to reach her people, and they pushed onward until the village came into sight. Small huts of wood and clay, smoke rising from a central fire, children running across the dusty ground. Joy sparked in Nayeli's chest. Home, she whispered. But that joy flickered. The moment the villagers saw her, riding in the arms of a man they didn't know. Their leader, Elder Mika, stepped forward. Worry,